Let's delve into the amazing campaigns of Alexander the Great, one of the most outstanding military commanders in the history of humanity. Let's explore his epic adventures, which have become legendary and continue to inspire people to this day. To begin with, let's recall who Alexander the Great was. He was born in 356 BCE in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, to the great King Philip and Queen Olympias. From his early childhood, Alexander found himself surrounded by great events and influential figures. His father, Philip was a bright and eloquent ruler who dreamed of a great Macedonian empire. Alexander grew up under the influence of this strong and energetic leader, and from a very young age, he began to understand the importance of power and military prowess. In his childhood, Alexander also received education, which laid the foundation for his future successes. His teacher was the great philosopher Aristotle, who instilled in him a love for knowledge, philosophy, and culture. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander studied literature, science, art, and politics, which made his education exceptionally broad and deep. Alexander's youth was also marked by his first military experiences. At the age of 16, he was already commanding Macedonian troops in the Battle of Chaeronea, where he displayed his military skill and courage despite his young age. This experience marked the first step in his long journey to conquer the world. Thus, the childhood and youth of Alexander the Great were a period when he laid solid foundations of military and political mastery, as well as acquired deep knowledge and education thanks to his teachers. These qualities and experiences gained at an early age became crucial for his future victories and achievements in the name of the great Macedonian Empire. Alexander's first significant campaign began in 334 BC, when he crossed the Hellespont and invaded the territory of the Persian Empire. The great king Darius ruling in Persia, represented a mighty force, but Alexander was full of determination and the desire to win. His army was small compared to the Persian one, but it was well prepared and motivated. Let's delve into the details of one of the greatest battles in history, the Battle of Granicus, which took place in 334 BCE between the forces of Alexander the Great and the Persian king Darius. This battle was the first major test for the young Alexander, who was just beginning his path as a conqueror. The situation before the battle was tense. Before Alexander stood a numerous Persian army led by King Darius himself. The Persian army was well prepared and equipped, and its numerical superiority was enormous. On the other hand, Alexander had a small but highly motivated and well-trained army that believed in their leader. Alexander arrived at the site of the future battle and carefully studied the terrain. He decided to use natural obstacles to diminish the Persian advantage. The Granicus River, flowing between the two armies, became a key element of Alexander's tactics. When the battle commenced, the Persian army was confident of their victory due to their numerical superiority. However, Alexander and his troops were full of determination and courage. He led his army by personal example, fighting at the forefront and inspiring his soldiers. The initial clashes were fierce but inconclusive. However, when the Persian army attempted to attack across the river, Alexander and his commanders seized the moment. They managed to organize a counterattack that proved decisive. The battle turned into a fierce struggle on the bridge across the river. Alexander and his troops fought with tremendous bravery and resilience despite the strong resistance from the Persians. Ultimately, thanks to Alexander's courage and tactical mastery, the Persian army was defeated. The victory at the Granicus brought Alexander and his army their first significant triumph in Persia. This battle also confirmed his reputation as a brilliant strategist and great military commander. The Battle of Granicus became a turning point in Alexander the Great's campaign and strengthened his position as a great conqueror. One by one, the great cities fell: Sardis, Miletus, Halicarnassus, Gorgippia. Despite the resistance encountered along his path, Alexander and his army continued their march forward, fearless and undeterred by difficulties. The Battle of Persepolis is yet another crucial episode in Alexander the Great's conquest of the Persian Empire. It occurred in 330 BC, after Alexander and his army had successfully traversed much of Persia's territory and reached the empire's capital, Persepolis. Persepolis was one of the largest and most fortified cities of the Persian Empire. It housed the royal palace, treasuries, and majestic temples, making it a significant strategic target for Alexander. Before attacking the city, Alexander carefully studied its defenses and devised a detailed plan of action. He utilized his knowledge of tactics and strategy to approach the siege most effectively. The battle began with fierce fighting at the city walls. The Persian defenders fought fiercely, but Alexander's army, motivated and well-trained, pressed on persistently. Brave Macedonians overcame obstacles and walls, penetrated the city, and prepared for the attack. The siege lasted several days, and ultimately, thanks to his strategic wisdom and martial prowess, Alexander's army managed to breach the defenses of Persepolis and enter the city. Brutal fighting ensued in the streets and squares, but the Macedonians, led by Alexander himself, proved stronger. In the end, Persepolis was captured, the royal palace was plundered, and numerous treasures were seized. This was a significant success for Alexander, which solidified his role as a great conqueror and allowed him to establish his influence in Persia. However, the capture of Persepolis also marked the end of the era of Persian dominance in the region. The city, which once symbolized the might and grandeur of the empire, was conquered, and its fall became a symbol of a new era in the history of the Middle East. Thus, the battle for Persepolis became one of the most important moments in Alexander the Great's campaign, confirming him as a great military leader and statesman. The campaign into India became one of the most exciting and challenging stages in Alexander the Great's campaign. In the early 326 BC, after the conquest of Persia was completed, Alexander and his army set out to the east to expand their empire and discover new lands. Crossing dry deserts and mountain passes, Alexander's army advanced deeper into the territory under Indian control. Their journey was fraught with difficulties such as water and food shortages, as well as resistance from local tribes and the armies of Indian kings. The first major obstacle on the way to India was the river Indus. The Battle of Hydaspes in 326 BC. It was a decisive moment in the campaign. Alexander and his army faced the forces of the Indian king Porus, who opposed their crossing of the river. However, thanks to Alexander's outstanding tactical skills and personal courage, the Macedonians emerged victorious, overcoming the resistance of the Indian forces. As they pushed further into India, Alexander's army encountered various Indian kingdoms and tribes, each presenting its own challenges and dangers. The Battle of Hyphasis was another significant engagement in the campaign, where the Macedonians clashed with the forces of the Indian ruler Porus and his allies. However, despite all the hardships, Alexander continued to move forward. He founded several cities along the way to India, including Alexandria on the Oxus and Nicaea. His army conquered numerous territories, and he sought to establish control over these new regions. Alexander's ultimate goal was the conquest of India, but his plans were thwarted by the growing discontent of his soldiers and fatigue from long and arduous campaigns. The reasons for the mutiny were diverse. Firstly, the soldiers were exhausted from constant battles and grueling campaigns. They were worn out by long marches through deserts and mountain passes, as well as by the heat and cold they had to endure. Secondly, many soldiers longed for their families and native lands. They had spent many years away from home, and some began to miss ordinary life and familiar rhythms. A third reason was the dissatisfaction of soldiers with some of Alexander's actions and decisions. Some of his orders, such as the imposition of Greek customs and culture in conquered territories, sparked discontent among his warriors, who often hailed from various peoples. When the army reached the river Ganges, the soldiers' mutiny reached its peak. They refused to go further and demanded to return home. They expressed their fatigue and discontent, demanding that Alexander end the campaign and allow them to go home. This was a serious challenge for Alexander and his leadership. He was forced to make a difficult decision on how to respond to the mutiny of his army. Ultimately, he agreed to return to Babylon, where it was decided to organize a new campaign. But the soldiers' mutiny showed that even the greatest conqueror could not control his warriors forever. Thus, the campaign into India became the final and most challenging stage in Alexander the Great's saint of the vast empire. Despite all the hardships and obstacles, he demonstrated his bravery, strategic genius, and determination in building his empire. Nevertheless, Alexander never lost his resolve and desire to conquer new lands. His campaigns became a symbol of strength and courage, and his name has gone down in history as one of the greatest conquerors of all time. Ultimately, his campaigns led to the creation of a vast empire, spanning territories from Greece to India. It was not just a campaign, it was a great journey that changed the course of history and left an indelible mark on the hearts of people. And so, concluding our immersion into the era of Alexander the Great, we see that his campaigns were not just a series of military campaigns, but a true epic of courage, determination, and aspiration for greatness. And his name will remain a symbol of greatness and courage for centuries to come.